Well, welcome everybody. Thank you very much for joining us on this live workshop today. My co-host joining me is Sera from Zambia, and today we are going to be talking about dependent and independent learning, and that is going to be our series, a three-part series all about independent learning, which connects very closely to our brand new course, which is on our Teach2030 website. So today we are going to focus on developing that particular style of learning and just thinking about how it differs from dependent learning, perhaps a style that we frequently lean on, that we frequently use. We're going to talk about the benefits of independent learning, why it's a really good style and method of teaching and learning, and how do we actually include this style of teaching into our classrooms, because it's a little bit different to perhaps what we're used to. So to begin with, I'm going to hand you over to Sera, who's going to talk us through the differences between dependent and independent learning. Okay, Sera?
Okay, thank you so much. Welcome everyone once again. So I'm going to talk about the difference between independent learning and dependent learning. So
Oh, we've got an audio issue perhaps. Everything okay, Sera? There you go.
Yes. So I'll talk about the difference between independent learning and dependent learning. So firstly, I'll talk about what dependent learning is. So on dependent learning, this is where we usually recognize learning as being a teacher-led lesson, where students sit passively and the teachers lectures and delivers the lesson. The other thing about the dependent learning is where students copy notes, work through exercises, and are directed through each stage of the lesson by the teacher. Also, under dependent learning, we also look at where it is characterized by a teacher instruction and intervention. We go further to look at dependent learning, where learning is characterized by a teacher instruction and intervention. So maybe to pose a question is, when we look at dependent learning as teachers, how often do we use this style of teaching in our classroom? Thank you so much.
I know that I frequently fall back on this type of teaching in my classroom. I begin the lesson, I get distracted, and it's very easy to just lecture the students and encourage them just to take notes and copy off the blackboard or the whiteboard. But actually, are we doing our students any favours by giving them lifelong skills by just simply lecturing at them? And that's what we're going to explore a bit more deeply as we go through the presentation. Okay, thank you, Sera. Would you like to carry on?
Yes, thank you so much. So as we looked at dependent, I would also love to allow us to go through what independent learning looks like. So independent learning, this is a style of teaching where we hand over the teaching to the direction of the students. So students make their choices and teachers simply support what they have been given. Also, under independent learning, students are self-directed and attempt new tasks without support. So in this way, students are taking responsibility for their own learning. Yes.
Fantastic. Thank you, Sera. So there is a big difference between dependent and independent learning. As we were saying, as Sera said, dependent is very much teacher-led. So we need to start thinking about turning that around and actually handing over the learning to the teachers, to the students, so they take more responsibility for their own learning. So we're just going to do a little exercise to have a think more deeply about that. can you have a think about the last time that you learnt to do something new? And then what qualities did you use in order to develop that skill? So, for example, I learned how to use a new computer app recently. It was very complicated, it was difficult, it was challenging because it was very brand new. So, the skills I needed were patience, perseverance, and I needed just to keep trying hard, to keep maintaining progress. And now I feel a bit more confident with this computer program and I'm a bit faster at it. So if you can, write your answers in the chat box of a skill or an activity or a hobby that you've recently tried or done in the past where you learned something new. And then the type of qualities that you needed in order to progress and develop that skill. Please put your ideas and your thoughts into the chat box and we can share when we learn something new and the qualities required. Sera, can you think of anything that you've recently done where you've learned to do something differently or something new and the kind of qualities that that involved?
Yes, I have. Actually, this has benefited me a lot already because I've seen myself having done some of the things that independent learning brings about. For example, on experiments, I just had a class with my learners where we were looking at food garnishing. So I just taught them to say, what is food garnishing? We explained what food garnishing is, and then I told them, I grouped them, and then I asked them to garnish some food. So I think some could come back to me and say, we are not ready to do this experiment, but I encourage them to say, whatever you have done, present it. So I think it developed some perseverance in them. Yes.
That's brilliant, Sera. Thank you very much for sharing that. Absolutely. And there's a few comments in the chat box. Alex has bought a new phone. It was complicated at first, so it took patience, it took perseverance in order to get better and better and see the functions that it can do, the performance and so forth. Thank you, Alex. And then we've got Annie, tried to learn classical dance, which required head, hand, eye coordination, concentration, flexible movements. And that's exactly what I was thinking about, that I was hoping for, because these particular skills, these are what we need to think about when we're introducing this new way of learning. And here's a few qualities that you've already mentioned that we will need to think about and rely on as we include this style of teaching into the classroom. Sera, would you like to go through the different qualities?
Yes, please. So the qualities that we have under independent learning is that you learn to listen, to read.
Please, can you mute your microphones, everybody? There we go. Thank you.
Okay.
Yep, carry on, Sera, please.
So we are still on looking at the qualities of independent learning. So these are the qualities that you get. First, you listen, you learn to listen, to follow instructions. You also learn to try new things. The other thing is you learn to experiment. You develop the skill of resilience, perseverance, practice, being courageous, and also overcoming obstacles.
That's brilliant. Thank you. And so what we're saying is, So what we're saying is when we try something new, like introducing independent learning, where we hand over this style of learning and progress and development to our students, it will be challenging at first, but we're going to need the same kind of qualities when we employ this learning, just as we learn to do something different in our lives. So the benefits then of this way of learning, all the skills that we've listed so far show that this way of learning is extremely powerful, that this is a really positive way of giving our students lifelong skills, and they can become successful in later life by using this style of learning. When they take ownership of their learning, they become more invested, more involved. They feel that they're in control of the pace rather than being rushed through something. They can develop their learning at their own speed, and therefore they won't switch off from when perhaps they might have done in a different way of teaching. It allows the students to become more reliant on themselves and more resilient, which are brilliant skills for later life. They are challenged to find solutions, which is a great skill for adulthood. Overcome obstacles, developing different strategies to manage the way forward when they're in a difficult situation. So these are the benefits that we are giving to our students when we start handing the learning over to the students themselves. So how do we actually do it? How do we create independent students in our classrooms? Because it's not a skill that's going to happen overnight. It's not going to happen in one day, in one lesson. So we need to start introducing the different ways to our students of learning. We need to provide opportunities for the students within our lessons, within our daily education. We need to allow them to develop, to grow, and we need to use a different method than perhaps the methods that we fall back to quite comfortably. So in the classroom, what do you think it might look like when we give the students ownership of their learning, when we give them a task to do independently? How could we make that happen in our classroom? Let's put some ideas together in the chat box. So for example, in my classroom, we've been doing a speaking and listening exercise where the students need to research an area of the UK and what it was like 50 years ago. I grouped my students together. I allocated the groups myself. I made some different decisions about who I would place together, and I gave them a topic to research. So at first it was a little bit worrying because the noise level was quite loud when I said, okay, off you go. I gave them instructions on what they needed to achieve and what they need and how much time that they had in order to achieve that. We came back together and each member of the group delivered the information and the research that they found. So that was an opportunity for my students to perform some independent learning in the classroom. Does anybody else have any examples of a time where they've used independent learning?
I think I can add on just when you were just explaining, I thought because I take grade 5 in home economics and then my main class is grade 1. So I do literacy in my class. So what I did for the first term, we look at sounds, blending and segmenting. So I had put a chart of sounds and other things in my classroom. And then I tell the pupils, these are your first to do things in class. First, you go through the sounds. So what happens is when a child comes in, maybe they'll find me already in class, and then they'll have to go on that chart. So sometimes they'll feel shy to read out what they are not sure of. But I've observed that as time goes on, they are able to read and to read to their friends. So I think they have gained some courage when they were not able to read on their own, and they are able to read even with their friend on their own. Yes.
Yes, that's wonderful. Thank you. I totally agree about the courage. I've noticed that the more I encourage my students to speak to each other, to deliver their research, to talk in front of the class, they're becoming braver and they are developing courage, like you say, Sarah. Thank you. Alicia, would you like to contribute? I see you've raised your hand and you've also contributed in the meeting chat. Thank you. Alicia, are you there? Would you like to contribute? I can see that you've talked about peer learning, which you use in the classroom, where you use the students themselves to develop their learning one-on-one perhaps, or in pairs. That sounds fantastic. And I can see that you've recently learned to use your stopwatch on the iPhone, and it was a student that showed you how to use it. And you worked together, so the student was leading the learning. Fantastic, thank you. Hello, Babelwa. Thank you so much for joining. I can see that independent learning is useful in your classroom, the multi-grade classroom. Learners are encouraged to work mostly on their own, but with teachers' guidance. I always encourage teachers to use more for engaging the classrooms. Thank you so much for your contribution, Babelwa. You're absolutely right. Independent learning, it does need facilitating, which is what we're going to talk about in a bit more detail as a series of workshops move forward. So, like we say, it could be an independent research task, it could be group or pair work, it could be the delivery of a presentation. So it's all about altering tasks that we would perhaps regularly deliver ourselves, where we're leading from the front, into a new way of approaching them, turning a task upside down and handing it over to the students so they can self-direct, they can move themselves through their learning. And that's a really important skill for life. So let's have a reflection then. The skills that we teach our children, that we focus on, we're trying to equip them with skills for life. Independent learning is the way to do this, and approaching tasks in different ways allows our students to develop all those skills that we talked about earlier in the workshop: courage, resilience, perseverance, patience. And I think as adults, these are skills that we can transfer to any situation. So therefore, it's so important to deliver them to our students and to give them the gift of these skills. And as teachers, it's our responsibility to guide them through this way of learning so they can reach their personal success, their outcomes independently. So moving forward after this workshop, have a think about a lesson that you've got planned for this week. Could you do it differently? Could you encourage the students to perhaps work collaboratively and direct themselves to a successful outcome, rather than perhaps you delivering the lesson content? Is there a different way of delivering that lesson? We've got a few more comments in the chat box, which is fantastic. Thank you so much. Boris, smart objectives at the beginning of the lesson will definitely help independent learning. It's important for the students to know what the outcome needs to be, what they need to achieve, and giving them the objectives to move forward. Absolutely right, to gain success. Annie, as a chemistry teacher, I can think about giving scenarios like making them imagine they are a chemist or something. They're asked to test the quality of the water. So using role play in order to experience a different scenario. That's great. Thank you so much. Elise, thank you so much. I believe independent learning is very important for all learners, and I totally agree with you. You're absolutely right. It is important for everyone because of the lifelong skills that we're equipping our learners with. Clear instructions, Boris, absolutely right. We need to keep it clear, keep it concise, so they don't get themselves into confusion or bewilderment. It's important that they know what the outcome is and how to get there. And you are the facilitator of that, which we will look at more deeply in the next workshop. Sandrine, welcome and thank you for contributing. Independent work is an essential component of a Montessori classroom. Yep, absolutely. It emphasizes self-directed learning. Brilliant. This is exactly what we're talking about. Thank you. Students explore, they engage with materials at their own pace and according to their own interests. Yes, you're absolutely right. That sounds fantastic. Exactly what we're promoting today. Lots of detail there about the materials being organized. Students have consistency, they know where everything is. It helps them become independent learners. Absolutely fantastic. Thank you. Well, thank you so much for all your contributions today. It's brilliant to know that we're all using independent learning and that it's something that we could maybe move forward with. As I mentioned at the start, we've got a brand new course which focuses in more detail with more ideas about how to take this forward. Our next workshop, part two of this series, will look more deeply into it as well. Is there anybody else who would like to offer any more contributions before we finish for today's workshop? Feel free to open your microphones and contribute or add anything into the chat box.
Maybe I can also say something again on independent learning. I think having looked at this course here, it has helped me to reflect on what I've been doing, and I think I've observed how we even encourage our students or identify students in their strong areas, like those who are free to speak publicly, to do things, to lead their friends. Because every time I leave work in class, you find that there'll be this one who say, teacher said we should do this first before we do this. So I think we are creating leaders at a very young age, which is very, very important, especially when you start teaching children to be leaders at a young stage, at a young age.
Absolutely, Sarah. Thank you. I think you're absolutely right. The skills and the qualities that we're providing and practicing with our students will help them to, you're right, become leaders. Well done. Thank you so much. Sandrine, you've got your hand up. Would you like to unmute yourself and contribute? Sandrine, are you there? Okay, right, we've run on as we always do, which is wonderful in one way because it's lovely to hear all your contributions, all your experiences. Thank you so much. But today I'm going to have to finish for this particular workshop. Please keep in touch. Please email. Please just keep going with your teaching, and please join us at our next workshop in May. Look out for the publicity, and thank you very much and well done, everybody. Have a wonderful day and take care.